Baseball, basketball, and football. This is True Sports, a TrueChat original podcast with your host, Caleb Spinner.
The Lone Star State is home to several professional sports teams, as well as thousands of passionate sports fans. For the past few decades, Texas has been a powerhouse, producing NFL Pro Bowlers, NBA Most Valuable Player Award recipients, and as recently as 2017, a World Series champion. Today on True Sports, we'll be taking a deep look at Texas sports, discussing the Astros, Dak Prescott, Bill O'Brien, and much more. As you know, my producer and I live in Ohio, about as far away from Texas as you can be in the United States. But fortunately, joining the show today is a reporter who's close to many of the franchises that call America's second largest state home. Dusty Baker is a sports anchor and reporter at Nexstar Media Group in Abilene, Texas. He follows most major sports leagues, but his main love is baseball, in which his heart belongs to the Los Angeles Dodgers. Thanks for joining us and welcome to the show, Dusty.
Hey, Caleb, thank you. It's a pleasure to be aboard here and looking forward to talking about some Texas sports and also sports in general outside of the state as well.
Yeah, I know, because as I mentioned in that opener, your baseball team's in L.A.
That's correct. I was actually born and raised in Los Angeles, California, actually a city just north called Santa Clarita. I played baseball growing up. Obviously, with the name as well, I was named after what was once a former Los Angeles Dodger and actually, ironically enough, now is the new manager for the Houston Astros. So my affiliation and my love of sports started with the Dodgers. Actually got into this industry because I would go to bed every single night listening to the voice of Vin Scully. None better than that. And ultimately, that's what guided me to get to where I am today. And now I get to cover Texas sports. So I get to cover the Houston Astros, the Texas Rangers, the Cowboys, you name it. That's what I'm covering out here in Abilene.
So let's hope that Mr. Baker, as the general manager, does not also steal signs. But anyway, we'll get on to talking about that for a little bit in just a minute here. We know your favorite baseball team is the Dodgers. Who's your favorite NFL team and your NBA team?
Yeah, so unfortunately, with the NFL, I root for mediocrity. I'm a LA Chargers fan. I grew up a San Diego Chargers fan, and I actually went to Texas Christian University. And the way that I found out about TCU was because I watched LT growing up as a kid. And so that's what first kind of got the name TCU out there, and then found out that it was a good fit for me. And so that's the school that I went to, and I can credit the Chargers for that. And then I'm also an LA Lakers fan. So, of course, at this time of the year, just what happened a couple of weeks ago with Kobe, it's still hitting home quite hard and kind of difficult to get over that. But the Lakers at least are playing well, and hopefully they can make this really difficult time with the Lakers franchise at least a little bit better based off how they're playing.
Well, little known fact, another group that put TCU on the map is Dude Perfect. They all met at TCU.
Right. Andy Dalton as well.
So we'll start with the MLB, looking at the Houston Astros. We talked a couple weeks ago about the sign stealing incident, what the Astros did wrong, what the punishments were dealt out by the MLB. And now we're going to look at it again. The MLB punished the 2017 World Series champions for illegal sign stealing practices used in both the regular and postseasons. The involved parties included the general manager of the club and a couple former players working on different teams. The manager of the Red Sox, for example, in 2018-19, former player on the 2017 Astros squad. Still couldn't escape the punishments there. We've talked about this with a guy who loved baseball and is close to baseball, but I want to get your thoughts as someone who's close to the organization. What are you hearing from the franchise about the incident and the MLB's sanctions placed on the team?
Yeah, I mean, at this point in time, it seems like most of the information has been released. And as we know, the Astros, the punishment ultimately was $5 million fine for the franchise. They lost their first and second round draft picks for both 2020 and 2021. So that's rather harsh. But the big, obviously, punishment was losing Jeff Luhnow, their GM, and AJ Hinch as well, the manager who actually was just interviewed for the first time last week to talk about the incident and confirmed, obviously, everything that's been going on around there. And so now the real question is how much more information is out there that we don't already know. One thing that came out this past week was Codebreaker. Essentially, talk has been about how the front office has started an Excel spreadsheet, essentially, that would detail signs and how to steal those signs that players would relay to the front office.
Really?
After obviously shooting it through the video cameras.
Really? Wow. That's huge.
Yes, it's gotten even worse there. There's more details now coming out about Carlos Beltran and his role with the team, with the Astros. And, of course, the Mets had to let him go after just hiring him. It's quite frankly the most Mets thing to ever happen is to hire a manager, have nothing to do with a scandal, and somehow have to lose their manager because he was involved in the scandal. So too many details to come out. Obviously, the buzzers with Altuve and Bregman, that's still something that needs to be further investigated. But it seems like every day that comes by, there's just one more grueling detail that we find out to make this scandal even worse than it already is.
Yeah, that's certainly a tough situation to deal with. I mean, you just got the guy, and then he's fired for something that's not even directly related to you. That's unfortunate right there. Were the ramifications justified in your mind?
So it's hard, Caleb. I'll have to tell you this first. Since I grew up a Dodgers fan, that 2017 World Series, that definitely hit me a different way. And so to find this information out as a fan's perspective, that was difficult enough. But as a reporter perspective as well, I can ultimately say that I feel like the punishment, it had its positives. I think the draft picks, definitely that sent a message, and ultimately having Lunau and Hinch suspended for a year that led to their eventual firing by Crane, that was a major punishment. But I do have a problem with the fact that the players right now still seem to just get away scotch-free. They had immunity to talk about the situation, and while I understand the details had to be revealed, the people that were punished ultimately, I feel like while they were involved and should have had some sort of say, Hinch especially, I think the players getting off without any sort of punishment whatsoever is absolutely ridiculous. And just this week, actually, Mike Bolsinger, who was the pitcher that ultimately got sent down after the Astros, he claims ended his career by stealing his signs. And I believe the number was 54 times that a trash can was hit in the inning that he pitched. I mean, that's inexcusable. And so he's suing the team for $31 million. Will he win? I don't believe he will, but it is an interesting statement to say that there are players that have lost their careers and ultimately have been punished because of the Astros stealing signs. And the Astros, on the other hand, they still have their rings. They still have the money. Altuve signed an extension after that World Series. So they really have only gained, and this punishment hasn't even hurt them that much.
Yeah, that's the solution we came to as well. The conclusion that we came to, that this was not severe enough. And then looking at the Red Sox, who are now under investigation as well for the same thing, we were looking at, should the World Series be stripped? Sounds like you're in favor of that.
It's a hard call because taking a championship away from a team, I mean, they did work hard to get there. But when you look at the Astros specifically, I think that 2017 World Series, more than the 2018 World Series, deserves to be stripped. It's hard to say all the details that factored into the Red Sox situation. We still need all of that information released before I guess I can make a natural judgment and proper consequences for that situation. But for the Astros side of things, I do think that World Series should be stripped. Now, I also don't think it should be given to the Dodgers. I think what they should do is just call it a vacancy, similar to what happened to USC when they won their national championship and Reggie Bush with his Heisman Trophy. I look at the same thing with the Astros. That's kind of the situation and how I see it should have played out. And I'm assuming it won't happen at this point. It seems like the MLB has made its ruling at this time, and they're going to stick to the ruling that they made. But with these continuous details coming out, you just never know as well. But with the Astros, yes, I do believe that championship should be stripped. For the Red Sox, we need some more information before we can determine that. Alex Cora, of course, was involved with both organizations. You would figure that, therefore, he had some say in what happened with the Red Sox situation that was similar to the Astros. My guess is I'll be saying the same thing about the Red Sox in a couple months from now.
Staying in the ballpark, but changing focus to your favorite team now, do you like where the LA Dodgers are going into spring training?
To say the least, you tell me about 3 weeks ago, you asked me that question, and I would say absolutely not. They had brought in Blake Trinan, 1 year, $10 million. I like that move. It's good for the bullpen. A guy that, of course, just a couple of years ago was arguably the best closer in the game. But outside of that move, they really hadn't done much. They had signed Jimmy Nelson on a 1 year deal. They had brought Alex Wood back, and that was really it. And while losing Hyunjin Ryu, he went to the Toronto Blue Jays. That was a big loss for them. Ultimately, though, of course, with the news this past week, Mookie Betts and David Price, after a trade that was all over the place with the Twins and the Angels and, of course, the Red Sox and Dodgers, it originally fell through. Now the Dodgers and the Red Sox get back together. They make the trade a done deal. So Mookie headed to LA along with David Price. Love the move. It puts them over the top, in my opinion. They're a top 2 team in baseball on paper. And if they remain injury free at this time, I think that this is going to be probably their best chance at a World Series. You talk about 2 MVPs in the outfield, a rotation that still is full of starters, and it's deep as well. And since the Dodgers didn't make that trade with the Angels, Ross Stripling and Jock Peterson are still, as of right now, with the LA Dodgers. And so that's just one more pitcher for the Dodgers to have, either in the bullpen or as a spot starter. And for Jock Peterson now, they can have in left field either a platoon with Peterson and Pollock, or they could have Peterson playing full time. So love what they did. It seems like all the pieces have come together. Watch out for the name Gavin Lux as well, because Gavin Lux is going to be something special at second base. And the big key for them is going to be Corey Seager, in my opinion, staying healthy this year.
When we come back, we're going to start talking about football with the Dallas Cowboys and the Houston Texans. Keep it right here on True Sports, and we'll be right back.
This is True Sports, a TrueChat original podcast with your host, Caleb Spinner.
Welcome back. We've been talking about Houston and Los Angeles baseball with Dusty Baker, a sports anchor and reporter at Nexstar Media in Abilene, Texas. We got an inside look at what was going on with the Astros scandal and what some of the minds in Houston are saying about it. Now we're going to take a look at 2 other teams, the Dallas Cowboys and the Houston Texans. The Cowboys right now are adjusting to life with Mike McCarthy. How are players and staff adjusting to that change at head coach?
It's interesting to watch not only the players and the staff, but the fan base as well reflect to this move for the Cowboys. Of course, everybody was calling for Jason Garrett's head for a while now in this particular season. A complete collapse and failure for the Cowboys, to say the least. And so it seemed inevitable that Jason Garrett would leave. And then, of course, you have a couple days go by, Garrett's not gone, and the fan base is furious. The players are in question as to who's going to be their coach for the next season. And so finally Garrett leaves. They bring in McCarthy, who, of course, has a great history with the Packers, has won a Super Bowl with them as well. It seems to me like the overall response to this move is positive. They love the fact that he's a winner, a proven winner with a team with the Packers that, of course, was consistent year in, year out. He is older. He was a year outside of the league. He took a year off. So the question is, how will he respond now, especially with, I think, the big question, the offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore, of course, brings a relatively modern mentality to the offense, and Mike McCarthy is more of a classic head coach. And so it's going to be interesting to kind of watch that pairing. Talking about the offense specifically, that's something to watch as you go into this 2020-2021 season. But ultimately right now, there is just a simply positive reaction to Mike McCarthy. And part of that is because Cowboys fans and players, I believe, were just super fed up with where Jason Garrett was at and how his leadership just wasn't there. You can credit Jerry Jones for part of that. He definitely has rather a big hand on the organization and on some of the decisions on what happens on and off the field. So having McCarthy and new face come in, it's going to be interesting to monitor as we move forward.
From what I hear from the Cowboys fans that I know around here near Columbus, is they're saying that he's not going to be much better than Jason Garrett. And GD a couple weeks ago said on air that he thought Mike McCarthy won because of Aaron Rodgers, won his Super Bowl because of who he had on his team, not necessarily his skill. What do you think of both of those?
You can make that argument, and that's definitely a fair argument. What I will respond to that with is that Jason Garrett had tools that you could arguably say was one of the best in the NFL this past season, and they didn't even reach the playoffs. And so McCarthy, while he might have won with great talent on the field, he was still able to win. And Jason Garrett, with great talent on the field, they weren't able to do anything. They couldn't even win their own division with the Eagles, and an Eagles team that was injury depleted and ultimately should not have had anything to do with the playoffs this year. The Cowboys, with talent base, just on paper, were far better than the Eagles in any aspect. And the fact that Garrett couldn't win with that, it's simply amazing to me, quite frankly. And so bringing a guy in that, yes, maybe he isn't that much of an improvement from Jason Garrett. He still knows how to win. That's what's the most important. He's won playoff games. He's been to the Super Bowl. And I think that experience, whether or not he had Aaron Rodgers and all that talent on the field, I still think that it's a great hire in that sense. And we'll see what he does with the talent now that he's presented with the Cowboys.
Dak Prescott is certainly a great player on that team. Again, one of the members of that impressive team that Jason Garrett had. But do you believe that he'll be the franchise quarterback for the Cowboys going forward?
It's hard to say. Dak has been on the spotlight now for a couple of years. And of course, now the talk has been with rumors swirling around Tom Brady that, they could franchise tag Dak. They could trade him. I mean, there are so many different rumors that are out there. Do I believe Dak is the player to be the franchise quarterback for the Cowboys? I personally do not. When it comes to his numbers, they're always impressive, but numbers don't tell the whole story. The amount of drives Dak has led at the end of games to win ball games has been minimal. He hasn't won the big game, and that's a big thing. And I know that, of course, a lot of people draw back to when Dak to Dez, when Dez caught it. That's a big thing that a lot of people look at. And I think that even then, he still hasn't won the big game, and there's been no proof that he can still do that. He's a great quarterback, but is he a championship quarterback? I'm not quite sure. When you look at the other quarterbacks that are out there, and more specifically, when you look at this year's draft and next year's draft, there are a ton of great possible quarterbacks to take over this unit. Of course, Tom Brady's a free agent, Phillip Rivers. We'll see what happens with that situation as a whole. Ultimately, in my opinion, though, I do not think that the Cowboys will go very far if Dak is the one that's taking the snaps at quarterback.
If you ask me, Tom Brady's going one of two places. He's either going to stay in Boston with the Patriots, or he's going back home to enjoy time with his wife and retire. I cannot see him playing for another team. I can't see him wearing another jersey. It's just too late in his career. And he's not at the age where one would think about going to another team, in my opinion.
It's hard to say because Brady has been jumping on and off the wires right now, talking about how he's not done yet. And while I would also agree with you and assume that the most likely destination he ends up at is still New England. I still think that that's ultimately where he goes. But there are teams out there that could really use him. And I think that Brady, being the ultimate competitor he is, he might be out there to prove that he can do this somewhat on his own. Now, of course, a lot of talk will be about Bill Belichick being a big reason why Brady's won so many rings. And of course, a lot of talk has been the other way around. But maybe Brady has heard this talk, and we don't know how personally he takes it. That's a big part of this. In my opinion, I think he goes back to New England. However, if he doesn't go to New England, I could really see him in a different uniform, such as the Bears. I think the Bears could be an interesting fit. I originally would have said the Broncos until Locke came out. Now I think that is kind of out of the question. I don't think a fit with the Cowboys is really there. I do think there is actually somewhat of a fit with my own Chargers. There's a chance that the Chargers jump on that. They need to bring some fans in. And if nothing else, Brady will do that.
Especially now with getting rid of Phillip Rivers as quarterback.
Exactly. And that's a big hole that the Chargers now need to fill. In my opinion, the best move for the Chargers is to go into the draft and select a guy like Justin Herbert out of Oregon. But what if they did that and also brought Brady aboard, had Herbert there for a year to learn under the best quarterback of this era? It's also not a bad decision to make that as well.
Some Texans fans, our usual producer JD included, wanted the franchise to get rid of head coach Bill O'Brien, but they got the opposite of what they wanted. The Texans recently promoted O'Brien to serve in the role of general manager of the organization while remaining head coach. What are your thoughts on this move?
Yeah, I've been talking to a lot of Texans fans about this, and you pretty much hit the nail on the head with that description. A lot of them are very unhappy with Bill O'Brien. Of course, you go back to these playoffs, and they blew a 24-0 lead against the Chiefs. And while, of course, it seems like every team blew a lead against the Chiefs, that's still a lead that you should never blow at that time. And O'Brien made some very questionable decisions in that ball game. Ultimately hasn't proven that he can win the big game yet. And I personally believe that he probably should have been gone as well. I think that there's a lot of very talented coaches that are out there that they could have gone with instead. O'Brien's not a bad coach, and I will defend him on that. He's able to make a team that's pretty talented go to the playoffs year in, year out. And so I do believe that he is not the worst coach that's out there, But I'm also very surprised that he not only has a job, but that he also got promoted as well. It's rather shocking in my opinion. And I believe a lot of the Texans fans out here, they're going to be calling for his head this year. This is going to be one of the coaches that you're going to see on the hot seat this season. And if the Texans do what they did this past year, if they go to the playoffs and they can't win the big game, I would not be shocked if that time around in 2021, Bill O'Brien is no longer the head coach and GM as well of the Texans.
Yeah, that was a surprise for sure that he got promoted. At least would have kept him where he is. Like you said, he's not anything special, but he's not terrible either. So just keep him where he is. But clearly they see something in him.
I have a family tie actually to Bill O'Brien.
Oh, really?
Yes. My cousin was the punter at Penn State when Bill O'Brien was head coach there. And so I've heard a lot of stories about Bill. I've heard that he's a really good guy, cares about his team, a genuine human being. So for that, I think that gives me a little bit of an insight on him as a person. But him as a head coach, of course, as I just detailed, it's something that he's got to improve on. And winning the big game is not something that he's proved yet, especially for the Texans nation.
Well, I know it. Freddie Kitchens was a great person and a bad coach, so I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand there. The Texans faced a lot of negative publicity from NFL analysts and their faithful fans when they decided to let safety Tyrann, the Honey Badger, Mathieu, sign with Kansas City. Was there something behind the scenes we didn't hear about with this decision to let Mathieu walk? Or was it really as bad as it sounded when the signing was reported?
Yeah, it was honestly really as bad as the signing sounded. At the end of the day, Tyrann Mathieu is one of the best defenders in the game, and you saw that in the Super Bowl. You saw that leading up to it. Ultimately, from what I had heard, Mathieu just wanted a different challenge and went to a team that he believed could win the Super Bowl and a championship right now. And incredibly, he picked the absolute right team to do that. For the Texans faithful, that was a pretty difficult loss because Mathieu obviously was a key defender for them, and you saw their defense suffer. And ironically enough, against the Chiefs, that was the team that they imploded against, gave up 51 points in the process. They fall 51-31, not the way that they drew that thing up. And so to lose Mathieu the way they did, it was, I believe, a 3-year, $48 million deal. It was difficult that they couldn't front the money. And on top of that, there was some pretty negative reaction surrounding the fact that the Texans were unable to retain Mathieu.
TrueChat's mission is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. If you think we're not upholding this mission at any time during today's episode, email your grievance to ethics@truechat.org. That's ethics@truechat.org. Stay in touch with TrueSports by visiting our website, truesportspodcast.com, and following @TrueSports_pod on Twitter and Instagram. Before we wrap up today's show, we're going to take a minute to hear from one of our sponsors.
This is True Sports, a TrueChat original podcast with your host, Caleb Spinner.
Welcome back. We've talked about Houston baseball, LA baseball, Cowboys football, and Texans football with Dusty Baker, a sports anchor and reporter at Nexstar Media in Abilene, Texas. Now we're going to talk about the XFL, the new football league started by Roger McMahon. Commissioner Oliver Luck actually runs day-to-day operations. The former Colts prodigy's dad, Andrew Luck. Dallas Renegades are the team in Dallas. Dallas's XFL team, the Renegades, lost their home and season opener to the St. Louis Battlehawks 15-9. Dusty, you were at the game, even reporting from the sidelines after the game. Walk us through that opportunity first.
Yeah, it was one of the most wild opportunities I've had. And, I've been very fortunate with this job as a whole. I've been able to cover the World Series. I've been able to cover ACU in their first time, the NCAA tournament. So I've seen my fair share. This is probably one of the coolest things that I've done, simply because the XFL returning, it was a big hype around the area. And to be able to go down the field, see what was going on around, and ultimately cover their first game ever in Dallas, that was a really special time. It's unfortunate that Landry Jones wasn't the starter because I think the result might have been a little bit better for the Renegades. But to be able to see ultimately more than anything else, to see the fan base show up and see a fan base, I thought that was pretty impressive. And as a member of the media, I've never been a part of something that was so easygoing and so relaxed. It was just an overall amazing atmosphere to be a part of. And I was very lucky to have that opportunity.
You were there at a potentially major moment in sports history. If the XFL remains in operation over the next few years and long into the future, what was the energy like in the stadium?
It was interesting. You know, obviously a new team coming around, you're trying to gain fans and you're trying to start new chants and, you're trying to establish yourself. And so to see these fans walk in and, of course, the Dallas Renegades, they're trying to go off the whole Renegades concept. They handed out bandanas. Fans were tying them around their face. So a lot of people walking in, you couldn't even see their faces jumping up and down. I mean, it was wild. At times I felt like I was at a soccer game. Now, if the game was a little bit better than a 15-9 game because the Renegades were only able to muster 3 field goals, I think that probably would have been an even louder and crazier atmosphere. Like I said, I expect it to be more like that as the season goes on. Once Landry Jones gets back in the action, Philip Nelson just didn't really have it going time and time again. And so once Jones is out there, I think that they're going to put up more points. But for ultimately their very first game ever at Globe Life Park, I thought that it was a very impressive scene. For me personally, it was a little strange sitting in the press box, looking out in the distance, sitting behind what normally was home plate. And instead I saw a football field. That was a strange scene to see ultimately. And, but I loved it. I loved what it had to offer. And I'm really excited for the future of the XFL as well.
From what you've seen and what you continue to see, are Texas football fans embracing this new league, not only in the stadium, but outside of it too? Are there banners flying? Are there people wearing the jerseys? What are you seeing in Houston and in Dallas?
Right. So it's hard to say exactly where the fan base is being established, whether it's more so the ones that were at the game or those that are viewing from their home. But the talk ultimately has been surrounding the XFL. There has been a lot of talk, a lot of energy, and excitement ultimately surrounding the XFL returning to Dallas. And I think a lot of these fans, they've been so fed up with the Cowboys that it gives them something to at least watch and enjoy in the off season so that they're not so down on their team continuously letting them down time and time again. And while I do think the Cowboys will be better next year, this is a nice transition for this fan base that ultimately they're getting a new ballpark for the Rangers. They're excited about that. That's been the talk. And so a lot of talk surrounding Arlington as a whole, that's been a big deal because now this is Globe Life Park, which was the Rangers' old stadium. Now it's the XFL taking over. You have down the road Globe Life Field. So a lot of excitement between those particularly 2 different stadiums. And I know that it was a packed house at Texas Live as well to watch the opener.
Yeah, I watched that game for a different reason. We don't have a team in Ohio yet, although it's rumored Columbus is going to get theirs in about 2 to 3 years, assuming the XFL stays in existence. But the closest one to us is the St. Louis Battlehawks. So I was watching that game as a member of the Battlehawks faithful, and I loved that game. I think when you said that the environment was relaxed, I got that exact same analysis from watching the game on my TV. The interviews were relaxed with the players. The sportscasters, you could even tell, were a little more calm than they usually are. Certainly brought the energy, but you could tell this wasn't the NFL. This was something brand new and very different.
I think the production level is something to mention too. Just the fact that on the TV side of things, the consumers at home, they're getting everything that they want. You get interviews on the sideline. I mean, it's quite unbelievable. A quarterback will throw an interception, heads to the sideline, and before a coach can talk to them, it's a reporter asking them what happened there. And I just think, one, it's hilarious to watch, but 2, it's really good for the viewers at home that ultimately that love the game of football. I think that it's not so much the talent on the field that's drawing them to it, but I think it's the fact that it's football, and it's football in the springtime. And it's as soon as the Super Bowl ends, people are missing football. Well, hey, guess what? You have the XFL to watch now. And I think that that's why the buzz is so strong right now.
And those interviews with the players, you get to see inside the head of the player. You get to see what they're thinking. One of my favorite things that I saw production quality was the look inside the replay booth when they're doing the challenging calls or when they're under further review. I loved being able to see them going through it frame by frame, talking about why they thought that this call should be reversed, or why it should stand. I love that aspect of it. I think the NFL needs to implement that as soon as possible. It's one thing to have guys like Mike Pereira and Gene Steratore tell you what they think, but it's a whole other thing to see in the mind of those reviewers and get to have a firsthand look at what goes on and what they're saying and why they're saying that it should be reversed or stand.
And it gives more clarity to the fans as well. And that's why I think it's such a great production ultimately for the consumers at home, because they feel immersed in the game. They don't feel like they're separated from the game. And ultimately they understand where calls are coming from. And I don't think there's been one call this past weekend where people were ultimately upset or complained because they actually understood what was going on since they were being brought to the action.
Right. I agree. Let's get into our agree to disagree question of the day for new listeners and those who may not be familiar with this segment. Dusty and I will each have 1 minute to answer a topic related question submitted by a member of the audience. Today's question: your way too early predictions. Who will be the 2020 World Series champs? Dusty, since you are the guest, I will let you answer this first.
This is a tough one because I could either swing with the positive notes of the Dodgers moves and the Yankees as well. You can always go back to the Astros. At the end of the day, I think the most complete team on paper is the Dodgers, but health is going to be a concern. The Yankees having Garrett Cole 3 times, arguably, in one World Series is going to be very difficult to beat. And so at this time, I do think that's the most likely World Series. It's very cliche and on paper at this point, but I have to go with the Dodgers at this time. Just that move that they made for Mookie. You know, you can have Garrett Cole 3 times in the World Series, but you look at the rest of that Yankees rotation, and it's not very deep. And if you go to the Astros, if that's a team that ultimately makes it to the World Series, they lost Garrett Cole. So that's a piece that they're going to really miss having. The Dodgers gained David Price, who I don't know how much he's going to offer for a World Series potentially. But at the end of the day, I think that rotation led by Buehler, if Kershaw can redeem himself, I think that is probably your World Series favorite, and the Yankees have to be lined up directly with that. If you look at the odds, it's plus 350 for both of them. A sleeper I have out there, though, that I will throw out, there's 2 of them in either league. Watch out for the White Sox. The White Sox are young. They have a lot of talent, and I love Luis Robert. I think Robert will project to be a superstar moving forward, and they could very well win that AL Central and be a sneaky team. I don't know if they have the rotation to get through it, but it's going to be interesting to watch them. In the NL, watch out for the Cincinnati Reds. I love what they've done this offseason. They have Mike Moustakas, they have Nick Castellanos, and their rotation is sneaky good. They could be a team that ultimately meets the Dodgers, in my opinion, in the National League Championship Series. So watch out for those 2 as well.
I'm going to renew my Tribe fan club membership here and say the Indians. No, I'm just kidding. Although I do love Yasiel Puig and Frankie Lindor. My actual pick probably has to be with either the Yankees, just because they're the Yankees. Look at that lineup and tell me that doesn't deserve a World Series nod. And maybe the Dodgers. I had the Dodgers Astros. That was my prediction going into the World Series this year. I still think that could happen again. So probably pulling for the Astros or the Dodgers there as well. JD is not here today. It's his day off, so I'm going to take over the games of the week. So in case you have a boring weekend, here's something to watch with Spinner's games of the week now today. On Saturday, XFL football, the 22nd, Houston Roughnecks play the Tampa Bay Vipers. Houston had one of the most dominant performances that I've ever seen in week 1. I think they're going to continue it here. The Roughnecks play the Vipers and in Tampa Bay. NCAA men's basketball, 12 p.m. Saturday. Number 1 Baylor Bears play the number 3 Kansas Jayhawks. It's always great when you see a ranked matchup. Even better when you see the 2 teams in the top 5. So I think that's going to be a good one there. Make sure to tune to that one. And the NBA on Sunday, the LA Lakers and LeBron and Anthony Davis get to meet up with New Orleans Pelicans and Zion Williamson. I'm going to love to see Zion Williamson and LeBron James, 2 of the biggest players in the NBA, go at it head to head for one of the first times ever. So those are my Swenson's games of the week. Now Spinner's games of the week for this one. Dusty, this has been a great show. Thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Caleb, it was a blast, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Hopefully we can get this going once again. It's wonderful to be a part of this, and you yourself, you're a great host. So you should be very proud of what you've been able to accomplish.
I appreciate it. Let us know your thoughts on today's episode on social media at TrueSports_pod. Also, make sure you visit TrueSportsPodcast.com to listen to previous episodes and to read the True Sports blog. New articles of the blog are posted Mondays and Fridays, so there's always something to keep you involved and entertained. For True Sports in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Caleb Spinner.
And I'm Dusty Baker.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next Wednesday. But for now, that's the show. We're out of here.